Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas Pei Gimel Halacha Aleph in the Ois V'Hader's edition Daf Lamed Hey. We're dedicating this class for the Hatzlach of the IDF, and Hashem should bless that we should get back all of our kidnapped Yidden. Amen.
Amen.
We're going to start on Daf Lamed Hey, Amud Aleph, all the way on top of the Amud. We are continuing in the beginning to learn about certain hetadim that a kohen has concerning the isur of him not being allowed to contaminate himself to corpse tuma. The Gemara is going to make a statement that metame kohen lirois as hamelech, as we'll explain. The Gemara is going to tell us that a kohen is allowed to be metame himself in the honor of the nasi. What's important is just to remind ourselves that yesterday we had a machloikas amiroim here in the Yerushalmi, whether a Talmud who's a kohen is allowed to contaminate himself by the passing of his Rebbe, meaning of the one who taught him Roiv Chachmasai. The Gemara here is going according to the Manda Amr, who was Rav Acha, that yes, a person is allowed to be metame himself to his rabbi. When we're speaking about the Nasi, which is the leader of the Jewish people, the Nasi is not necessarily that individual's Rebbe who taught him the Roiv of his Torah knowledge. Nevertheless, like Rav Acha, we'll learn a shita that a person could contaminate himself with kvayt hanasi. Actually, we had a sugya in Ksubas and Ashkafta, the Rebbe, Kuf Gimel, Kuf Dalid, what happened when Ben HaKadosh passed away, and we're going to have a similar sugya over here that will assert that there's no kohuna by the burial of the Nasi Yisrael. The Gemara is going to want to know whether a kohen can contaminate himself with kvayt aviv v'imay, as we'll explain what it means. And then, after we're going to finish with the unique questions regarding the kohen, we're going to go back to something that we learned on Daf Lamed Gimel. On Daf Lamed Gimel, we learned in the bottom of Amud Aleph, at the top of Amud Beis, that, for example, a person is not allowed to eat in the presence of a corpse. Lo yaglorosh. So, behemshach to that, we're going to learn that one is not allowed to ask a halachic question, nor is a Rav allowed to respond to a halachic question in front of the mita of a maze. Same concept of loyal glarash. Well, since the maze is not someone who's unable to engage in Torah study, learning Torah in the proximity of daladamas of a maze, which is prohibited. And finally, we're going to learn this unique halacha that those who are carrying the bear, those who are the noise hamaze, are not allowed to wear sandalim. As we'll learn, the reason for that. Let us start on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yanai, okay, behemshech to the din going back of Kohuna, that he's making a statement. Metame koyin leaders as Samel. Now, it's very important just to know the following. The Gemara is not speaking about Tuma Doiraisa. As the Charedim points out, you can look on top of the Amid, that we're dafka not talking about Tuma Doiraisa. Yes, we are talking about Tumas Beis HaPras, which is only a Tuma Midrabanan. We will learn on Amid Beis today. We're going to chazer in the Charedim and Mishnah and Ahalois that will describe the two types of Beis HaPras, which is extremely important. We won't do this now. We will do this soon. There's a place called the Beis HaPras. A Beis HaPras is a place where Mid Doiraisa there is no Tuma. The Rabbanan decree that it is considered tummy. Says Rabbi Yanai that if you have a king going by, and as we'll learn in a moment, there is a mitzvah to see the glory of a king. Even a Goyish king, we'll see soon why. So if the only way to get there, to see the procession of the king, is by going through a Beis HaPras, says Rabbi Yanai, that a kohen, like we learned, what did we end up learning yesterday? That the Chachamim already made a gzeira, that Gush Eretz Ha'amim, later Avid Eretz Ha'amim, those details we didn't have in the Yerushalmi. But going to Chutz La'aretz automatically makes us midrabanan tami b'tumas meis. So how can a kohen go to Chutz La'aretz? So we learned a whole baraisa with many hetadim. In other words, we already learned that when it comes to certain scenarios, the Chachamim, who were the ones who said that this or that is tamei, lechatchila never said it. B'negeya a kohen in certain circumstances, like for example to go get married, like for example to go learn Torah, like for example to adjudicate a din if the kohen is the dayan, v'chuli, as we learned yesterday. So here also he can go leaders b'nei amel. And now the Gemara tells us a story to support this din, that Katzelik Duk Lit Yonus, he was a Roman emperor, Emperor Mamish. Sometimes the Gemara uses the words emperor, not over here in the Babli, when they were just a general. Everyone like older Russians are engineers, Lamashal. An engineer, whether they, because they went to grade 1 in engineering school. So in the Gemara, all the Romans were like, if Vlad has something what to say, he's thinking whether he should say, whether he's quiet, he needs a coffee. So the kid said, this guy was like he was the emperor. And when he came to Eretz Yisrael, a Goyish king, Chamoin l'Rabchia Barabo, Mifsa al Kivrei Detsur, begin Mechamine. Rabchia Barabo was seen when he was going to see this king, this Roman emperor, he was seen walking on top of the graves in Sur in order to see him. Now here, there's something very strange. What's not very strange? So the Haredim, 8 lines from the top of the Amid, says that Rabchia Baraba was not a Kohen. Now hold on. So why are we even bringing it over here? So the Haredim says, he says that there no person, forget about a Kohen, no one is allowed to tread on top of the graves of others. Can't do that. Well, Iglorash. Another problem. Nevertheless, since he wanted to go see the emperor, and the only way to get there was by going direct, not going around, he allowed himself to tread on top of Kavadim. So the Gemara is making Gaza me'inyan, so a Kohen can be matam himself with Tumah D'Rabban. Okay. There's a big problem with that. You know what the problem is, guys? See, the good thing of learning Daf Hayomi is that just one Daf ago. See, if you learn slowly, like in Yeshiva, it takes you like 8 months to learn a half a Amud, then you forget. You know nothing. Here, at least, we don't understand that good, but we learned yesterday that the Rabchia Baraba is a Kohen. That's a problem. Rabchia Baraba is a Kohen. It's a bigger problem. That if Rabchia Baraba was treading on top of graves, that means that he contaminated himself midoiraisa. And that's something that you're not allowed to do. The whole discussion of Rabbi Yanai is that a Kohen is allowed to contaminate himself b'tumas meis midrabanan for the inyan of seeing a king. So Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky of blessed memory says something very important, and it's punkt shayach to here in LA. Emes, that when a person is buried, l'kula alma yid. According to the Chachamim, even a goy. According to the Chachamim, even a goy gives off corpse tuma, oil, tumas oil. Tumas oil means that according to the Chachamim, you're not allowed to walk over the grave of a goy. That the goy was buried directly in the ground. But if he was buried, like here in LA, they put everyone in these containers in the ground, right? These cement containers. And there is a poiseyach tefach between the body of the corpse and the cover of that box. You know what I'm talking about? Not in every cemetery. Of course, not by uns. By uns, but you can't say that in English. We'll get arrested over here. So there, if there is a container that has a tefach of empty airspace between the corpse and the cover, so we know that then the tumah midoraisa is contained. It's not bokeh of oil of oil, but midrabanan you're not allowed to go. That's how Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky explains the Gemara. Not like the Charedim who says he was not a good promise. One amud ago we learned. Remember that Rabchia Bar Abba, the son of Rabchia Bar Abba, never walked under that archway in Kesarin because they knew that other people are buried under the Anyways, let's go back. Whatever it was over here, there was a certain rabbinic rule that was violated in order to see the king. Like Mark says further that Rab Chizkiya Rabbi Yochanan. Now, what's the mitzvah of seeing a king? It says mitzvah leaders Gedoyle Malchus. You know what's beautiful about Gedoyle Malchus? Dafka means not all kings. Gedoyle Malchus means people of high nobility. I think Gedoyle Malchus would mean over here to see a senator, Gamkein, to see the head of the justice, to see the leading people of the government. Why? What's the mitzvah? In order that Shetavi Malchus Beis David, when Mashiach will come, then Malchus. There's something called a contrast. Most of us don't appreciate what we have because we don't have a contrast, right? When you are able to contrast, then you see who's what. When we're going to see even the glory that they gave to the Roman emperor, and I'm sure they gave him a lot of covet, whether they gave it from love or from fear, they gave him covet. The type of covet that will be given to Melech HaMashiach will be so much greater that it's a mitzvah to see the covet they give to a king now, to appreciate the upgrade, the qualitative upgrade that will be given to Melech HaMashiach. Okay. And because of that, yes, a Kohen a kohen can go to Mas Beis Ha'amim, a kohen can go to a Beis Hapras. Next. Now the Gemara wants to know, Mao sheyitam a kohen l'chvoid hanasi. Now this is important. So says the Charedim, 17 lines from the top of the Amid, like the middle of the narrow line, says the Charedim that yesterday we learned a machloikis. Remember, there was a suffix. There was a suffix. What was the question? Is a kohen allowed to contaminate himself when his Rebbe passes away? But Rav Acha had no suffix. Rav Acha knew that yes, he could. Based on that shita, says the Charedim, only im tim soloimer that the l'sha'ar chacham gadol she'enoi rabbi asur l'tam. Only to your Rebbe you can be matam, but to another great leader you can't. What about to the nasi? The meaning nasi halachically, technically means to the head of the Sanhedrin. However, we learned this when we learned ksubas. What did we learn in ksubas? That we learned this in a toisvis, that when the Rabbeinu Tam passed away, there was one of the great Rishonim wrote that there was no, I would contaminate myself to the Rabbeinu Tam during the burial. Lav Dafka, he would succeed in doing so, but he would go to the Levaya, and if he would be within the Dalad Amas, so be it. Why? Because the Rabbeinu Tam, even though there was no Sanhedrin, was considered the leading Jew of that time. And we, Chabad Hasidim, were familiar with the term Nasi. We use the term Nasi. Nitzoi Shel Yaakov Avinu, the Neshama Klalis that is given to one Yid once in a generation. That's what he's talking about. Now, if you're going to hold that even to your Rebbe, you cannot be Matama yourself, the Charedim is saying this statement would not even asked. The answer would be no. But if, according to those who hold, you could be Matama yourself to your Rebbe, Kohen can be Matama himself to his Rebbe, Rabbi Hitaturim Roiv of the Torah, but to someone else's Rebbe, he cannot. What about to the Nasi? Even though the Nasi doesn't necessarily teach you the Roiv of your Torah, but he's the Nasi. Now, I don't want to add something. I know there's not that much time, but there's another topic which we're going to have in the Yerushalmi. In the Yerushalmi, there's a shita that says that a tzaddik doesn't give off tumah. In the Gemara Bavli, such a statement is not made. It's brought down in Tosfos in the name of a medrash. When again, the burial of Rabbi Akiva. When Rabbi Akiva was tortured to death by the Romans. He was skinned alive by the Romans. And he had a mishamish called, I think, Yehoshua Hagarsi. And I stand corrected if someone here, maybe Alex or whoever, Danny, you remember? Something Hagarsi. I think it was Yeshua Hagarsi. And Eliyahu Hanavi, who's a Kohen, Pinchas Eliyahu, came to Yeshua Hagarsi, Gilui Eliyahu, and he told him that Rabbi Akiva's remains are in that cell. Let's go bury him. Many of us went to the cave of Rabbi Akiva. Who brought him there? The whole thing was a miracle. So the story was that Yeshua Hagarsi went with Eliyahu Navi, and they miraculously went into that holding area of the Romans. They kidnapped Rabbi Akiva. They took him back. They took his body and they buried him. After he buried him, first he needed the two hands of Eliyahu Navi. After he buried him, Yeshua Hagarsi asked Eliyahu Navi, "Are you not a Kohen?" How great is that? He didn't ask him before. He needed him. So there, the Medrash says that Eliyahu Navi told Yeshua Hagarsi that, I forgot the exact lashon, but the content is that a tzaddik doesn't give off to him. In Ashkafta the Rebbe Ksuvas Daf Kuf Gimel, and in this Gemara, I want you to know, this Gemara holds the opposite. Why do I say the opposite? Because if our Gemara would follow the Shita, which, by the way, Hasidim accept in our minute, and so do Sfardim, that what? That Kivrei Tzadikim Einan Metamin. If Kivrei Tzadikim Einan Metamin, then what's the issue? Why is there even a question? There's no tumah. People should be aware of that. And that's why when the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away, for people that went to Lubavitch, people that went to Haditch over here, they know that by the Alter Rebbe, there was a covering over his burial place. We don't know which one is his daughter, which one is him. Bevadai. But that means when you walk in there, if you're going to subscribe to the Shitas that hold that a tzaddik gives off tumah, that's our Gemara here, then a coin cannot go in. The Rebbe said that when they built the oil for the Frierdiker Rebbe, now you'll chap to build it in a way that even the Yidden that don't hold l'shita that kivrei tzadikim einan metamin, they should be able to go to the oil. How do you do that? Two things. Number one is there's no roof, and number two, there is a wall 10 tefachim high that goes from the ground that railing is not, you shouldn't fall over. That means that once you are in that room, even though you are within Daladamas, Atazoi, because that's a mechitza, that's 10 tvachim, and there's no roof over it. It's gavalda. But a kohen cannot lean over. And according to some shitas, he could throw it in there, but he can't lean over. According to some people, he cannot even go on the wall. Now, we meaning Hasidim go even kahana. But when people, just to be aware how this Gemara clearly doesn't follow that sheet. This Gemara holds that a Nasi gives of Tum. The only question is when the Nasi is being buried, the Chavod means that during the burial. And Fakir, that was the whole story of Ashkafta the Rebbe, that the Gemara speaks about in Ksubas, that Kohanim were Matama themselves. No, they said that Kahuna's bottle. They said there's no Kahuna's bottle today, which implies there's Tumah. If there wouldn't be Tumah, why does Kahuna have to be bottle? Okay. Now, says the Gemara, he asked the question. So says the Gemara like this: Kad demach Rabbi Yudan Nasiya is Rabbeinu Hakadosh. Says Azoy Zok Techaredim. Okay, the redactor of the Mishnah. That's Rabbi Yudan. Now we know from the Bavli, we call him Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and he had a grandson called Rabbi Yehuda Nisiyah. So he was already the Nasi in 2 generations later. It's in the Yerushalmi, so it's easy. In the Bavli, Nasi Nisiyah. Pashat. Nasi, we know, Nitzu Shel Yaakov Avinu. How do we touch the Nisiyah Chveisish? I have to hear from a Psamimush person, how do you add the hay? What's the hay? But in the Yerushalmi, Nisiyah is also written by Rabbi Yehuda. Now, he had a grandson. So the way just to get used to, you have to get used to these things. That Rabbeinu HaKadosh is called Yudan. There's no hay. And his grandson is Yudah. Just to know who is who. So the first one, Kad the Mach. The Mach is what they would call on the Bavli mace. They don't use the word Misa here, which is beautiful. We use the word passing away. So Kad the Mach. Rabbi Yudan Nisi'ah, when Rabbeinu HaKadosh passed away, Achris Rabbi Yanai, of Amar means for Amar, Ein Kohuna Hayoy. Clear, guys. That means, according to him, Rabbi Rabbeinu HaKadosh gave off Tumah. Eloma, during the burial, Ein Kohuna Hayoy. You got it? Now, furthermore, Kadamach Rabbi Yudan Nisi'ah, you see, not Yudah. That's his grandson, who is Bar Berei. Problem is that here they wrote Rabbi Yudah. You have to get used to this. Now, maybe this is a mistake in the text. You see, before he's called Yudan, here he's called Yudah. And how would you even differentiate? I think that, anyways, I said mine already. What happened? We just learned Rabbi Chia bar Abba. We're going with what we learned last time, like Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky pointed out. He was a kohen. He pushed Rabbi Zeira, who was also a kohen, Bekanishna the Gufna de Tzipoidim. And there was a Beis HaKnesses in the vineyard of Tzipoidim, and that is where they held his one of the eulogies. And as the minig is that the body is brought, like we learned yesterday, inside the Beis HaMedrash, inside the Beis HaKnesses. So the kohen Rabbi Zeira was hesitating to go inside. Rabbi Chia pushed him inside because that's giving cover to the Nasi. In other words, sometimes you have a debate with your mouth. Here, in other words, Rab Zeira held, you can't be matama yourself. Yeah. No. But one thing is important. First of all, okay, I want to take a step back. The kid said there was definitely the Afar Paraduma after the Churban Bayis Sheni. Definitely. At some point, shortly after the Churban, we rebuilt the Mizbeach. We learned that in Pesachim. It's a Mishnah Pesachim, and Korban Pesach was brought. Now, when Korban Pesach was born after the Churban Abayis, either it was brought because whoever brought it used the Afar Paraduma, didn't run out that right away. It lasted for a while, or because Tuma is the Chuya with Tzibur. And I want you to know that even nowadays, when we don't yet have the Afar Paraduma because we're choosing not to make it, for whatever Golistic reason, a kohen is not allowed to be matam himself. It's not like, since I'm tummy anyways, the corpse tomb, I can go into a cemetery. Bistama, let's go. No, it's either they had the Afar Paraduma, so he contaminated him, and then they went through the process of Tara, or they were tummy anyway, but a kohen is not allowed to do it. And he held Rabbi Chia bar Abba was so upset with him. He pushed him into the Beis HaKnesses. And on third story, everything is stories here. That now there's so many different gerses. And a big Yasher Koyach toys for and then to the art scroll, how they schwitzed and they put the gersa. We're going to be like this. Kad demach, it should just fit. Rebbe Nehoroi, who is Ahu Ha, who is the brother-in-law of Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. Now, what's time to know, Jewish history, Zajac that this Rabbi Nehoroi was the Nasi after Rabbi Yudan Nesiya. But you see again in the Charedim, he calls Rabbeinu HaKadosh with a line in them. I think I got it right. I think the grandson, Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, was with a Yudah. The original one, the redactor of the Mishnah, Yudan. So this was right after Rebbe. Rebbe passed away, Rabbi Nehoroi became the next leader. Nasi there meant the head of the Sanhedrin, Mamish. So when Rabbi Nehoroi passed away, this is called, it stayed in the family, like by Hasidic Rebbe. No, he passed away. His brother-in-law became the Rebbe. Then when he passed away, the Tzemach Tzedek became the Rebbe. His grandson became the Rebbe. So what happened was Sholach Rab Chanina Basa Rab Mana. Rab Mana was a Kohen. He sent him come participate in the burial, but Rav Mana did not go up. See, that's the question whether you can be matama yourself. Amalei and Rab Chanina was justifying why he told him. Rav Mana told Rab Chanina, "Im b'chayehem ein metamin lohen." What is he talking about? Zokte maraful. There's so many different approaches. He says like this. That if I'm a coin, if when my Rebbe was alive, his Rebbe was Rabbi Nehoroi, it says the Mahara Fulda, that if he was standing in a place of Tumah, right? Rabbi Yehuda guys, they were from Shevet Yehuda, they were not Kahana, didn't see him. So when he would imagine if the Rebbe is standing in a Beis HaChaim, just for an example, and there's an inyan to give cover to your Rebbe. So says Rav Mana, if when my Rebbe, Rabbi Nehoroi, was alive, if he would have been standing, let's say, in a cemetery, I would not be allowed to give him honor when he's alive to go in the cemetery. So
cemetery means just outside of Eretz Yisrael. So it's a rabbinic tumah, and he holds that you're not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael to go to your Rebbe. So he says if you're not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael while they're alive, certainly you can't be.
But I know that Danny's reading the art scroll for Yasher Koyach. I read the Mara Fulda. Could be one pshat, another pshat. The Mara Fulda is not Dafka not saying that. But I'll tell you why he's Dafka not saying that. Because when it came to a burial, you have to be Matami yourself with Tumah Doiraisa. That's the whole issue of this Amud. You have to know which one is the Rabban and which Doiraisa. And if he cannot bring a proof, you're saying that even if I can't go to be Matama Torah the Rabbanan, Shana Dorais. Very nice. The Marafulda doesn't say that at all. I'm just reading the Marafulda. These are all Achrayim. That's the thing. I'm saying there are different opinions. Saying if I cannot go into a Makkah in Tuma, B'chayeyen for sure not b'misas. So the Gemara says that I'll tell you the difference. You're right. When they are alive, you cannot be Matama yourself. You cannot do that. Aber when they pass away, now listen to the words of the Gemara. Amar Rab Nasa b'misvasan also waisam kemeis mitzvah. How beautiful is that? In other words, when someone passes away, if no one is there to bury him, we know from the psukim in Nazir. That's the source. That a kohen could and should be matam himself, but if there's no one else to bury. So the amount of covet that's demanded by God by the burial of a Nasi is that no matter how many people are there, it's not enough people. You are needed there. If you won't go there, you're neglecting the basics. So just like we find this concept of a meis mitzvah is not said b'chayei. So b'chayei, and you're right, you cannot contaminate yourself. But b'misasan, you have to do so. And again, okay, right. Says the Gemara. So one say no. So it says like this. So what are we talking about? Yeah. So Mendel is asking, what are you talking about? The Torah says you could. Says the Pnei Moshe, when they are alive, kedei lechabdan. You're reading the Pnei Moshe. Im muter leilach afilu b'makim tuma, to give them honor. Now here is where you have to chop. The whole Amr goes back and forth. We're not asking about Tuma D'Oraisa. Tuma D'Oraisa for sure not. To greet one's father or mother and becoming Tommy D'Oraisa, Kohen is not allowed to do that. But if the issue is only the Rabbanan, like we learned yesterday, Tumas Eretz Ha'amim, can a person go l'chutz la'aretz to pick up and greet his father or his mother if he's a Kohen? Stam lahoyer, that if l'chavoy the imay I get, because dabar al aron, dabar al b'nei, right? The whole issue of corpse tomb is only for the male kohen. But if he's going to be mechaber his aviv, who's a kohen, how's he a kohen? Because his father is a kohen. He says, father afrayak. We don't say, nevertheless, can I'm from? Can I go be mechaber my father by going chutz la'aretz? That's the question. So what's the answer? Rabbi Yasa story. Everything here is gepasket mitamais. That Rabbi Yasa Shama, the Asos Imei, that his mother is coming to Batzra. We're speaking about all places outside Eretz Yisrael. And says the Charedim that if he would have learned the Braisa we learned yesterday that gave so many Hatedim, for sure he would have known that he can go greet the mother. So says the Charedim. He did not know the Braisa that we learned yesterday. He says if a person is allowed to go l'chutz la'aretz to become a dayan, for sure you can go to give honor to a parent. He didn't know that. So what happened was he asked Rabbi Yechon, Ma'ulat says he wanted to go meet his mother. So Amalei Rabbi Yechon said, now Rabbi Yechon, as we'll see in a moment, had a unique love to the land of Israel, not related to Kahuna. Rabbi Yechon never would leave Eretz Yisrael. So there's another layer. So you see, he's subjective over here. He Bechlal didn't like the concept of leaving the Holy Land. So Amalei Rabbi Yechon told him, like, 1 second, if there's a pikuach nefesh involved, you kidding? If you find out today your mom is in Batzra, yeah, go get her. Because who knows what's going to go on over there. Then say, if it's pikuach nefesh, by the way, you can even go to be matami yourself to D'Oraisa. That's what he was saying. But in Mishum covered over the imay, Rabbi Yechon says, I don't know. Because if there's no danger for her safety, you're going just to give her honor, I don't know. Now, the issue was just going, that's Tumah D'Rabbanan. And the I don't know bothered the other chevra there. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, oid hi tzricha. What do you mean, I don't know? Look inside the charedim on the bottom of the Amid. Hasha'ayla b'mekoyma imedis. Ki aderech batuach. In other words, Rabbi Yechanan was hoping that this guy would say, not this guy, that Rav Yasa, the great Rav Yasa, would say, hey, there's a danger. When a Rav tells a person, is here like a pikuach nefesh, is here, he was hoping he would say, yeah, there's some sakana. Problem was there was no sakana. This was before Islam. It was safe. So now here's just 1 second. The problem is you didn't answer the question. It's only of a ve'imay. Daflamen helmet base. So atra alei de Rabbi Yechanan. Let's go with the words ilovei. In other words, when a Rav doesn't give an answer, what do? You got to nudge him. So he didn't let Rabbi Yechanan off the hook. And V'mar, until Rabbi Yechanan says, listen, Im Gomarta Lot says, if you already decided to go get your mother, you know what it sounds like? It sounds like when you ask another question, I'm doing it. Can I do it? It sounded like he was saying, if you're going anyways, Tavei B'Shalom. And by the way, you don't say a person Leich B'Shalom. That was the end of the Septa Brachas, right? Leich L'Shalom. Remember that? But he wasn't speaking about going. Rabbi Yechanan couldn't even tell a Jew to leave Israel. He was telling him, come back. When coming back, you can say B'Shalom. So he worded it in a way where it sounded like it was a b'di'evet. Right? When you tell a person, Im Gomarta Lot says, if you decided to go, not go in peace. If you decided to go, then you should come back in peace. So the Gemara wants us to know, Rabbi Lazar clarified, Rabbi Yechanan worded it that way because Rabbi Yechanan had nothing to do with a tumah of a kohen. Rabbi Yechanan loved Eretz Yisrael. He couldn't think about a Jew leaving Israel. It didn't work for him. So but if you take that unique Ahavas Eretz Yisrael out, God forbid, but if you put that on the side, then what he told him was not a b'di'evet, it was a lachatchila. Yes, l'chvoid of ve'ima, you are allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael lachatchila. Shamar Ablazev Amar Ein Rishus Gedoyla Mizu. That's a lechatchila dikahet. That's one way of learning this Gemara. The Pnei Moshe learns it different, but the same. Gavaldik. Okay. Now, final inquiry in honor of Ido ben Egea Koyin, and then we'll go back to the general Kavarames. Mao sheyitame Koyin lechvoid harabim. What does that mean? What does it mean lechvoid harabim? So let's read inside the Charedim. And I know everyone has a different way of understanding. 6 lines from the top of the Am. So the Charedim says that this kasha, because of the flow, everything flows, is dumya da'ava v'imoy, which is like this. Listen to im rabim boy mechutz la'aretz la'aretz Yisrael. Ma'u sheyetze koyin likrasam lahakol pneim. Just like a child should be machabed a parent, including greeting him. Greeting him means you go pick him up from the airport, you go out to bring him back. What happens if you have a big group of Yidden coming to Eretz Yisrael, and there's an inyan of going to greet them, but you're a kohen, and midrabanan the whole chutz la'aretz is tamei. And he brings al derech shashoninu in Bikurim that whenever the Yidden would come to Yerushalmi with Bikurim, there would be a whole procession of people that would go out to greet them. That's the way the Charedim learns the question. So back over here. Mao sheyitame koyin lechvoid harav. So the Gemara answers by quoting a Braisa, not a story, but a Braisa. Tanei ho yisham shtei derachim asimois. Now the Braisa is not speaking about kvoid harabim. Yes, the Braisa is speaking about people, says the Charedim, that are going to do the mitzvah either of Pinyan Shemuyim or of Achnasas Kala or Havoyis Hameis. Okay, and on the way to the mitzvah, this is mamish the sharblat of Tanya. There were 2 ways. Achaz rechoika. It's longer, but it's pure. How great is that, huh? And the other way of getting to the mitzvah is kroiva, but utemeya. Now, I want to make another point. Temeya means midrabanan. It has to mean. Because the question of Mao sheyitam koyin lechvoid harabim, the way we're learning pshat, is only tuma derabanan. Tuma deraisa ina alado. Okay? So here like this. So it says the Braisa something amazing. That im hayarabim holchem ba'rochayka, then you have to go ba'rochayka. Don't separate yourself from the group. But im lav says the Charedim, no, that people want to do a mitzvah, and they zrizam agdim a mitzvah, so they're taking most people are not kohanim, they're going on the shorter road, and you, the kohen, you want to join them, says the Braisa, hoylach bekroiva, you are allowed to join them. You're becoming tamei midrabanan. Right? Answer is mepnei kvoid harabim. That's another application of kvoid harabim. So befeidish, a kohen is allowed to go l'chutz la'aretz, which is tumah derabanan l'kvoid harabim. Now says the Gemara, at kedoim b'torah devrei. What we learned right now is only midrabanan. What about by tumah d'oraisa? When people learn this Gemara, they don't understand. You can't eat this Gemara. Why would a kohen be allowed to be metam himself with tumah d'oraisa? The Torah says you're not allowed to do it. So because of this, at least you have a Charedim here. And the Charedim, which is the end, the medium line under the Gemara, right? At kedoin, and I'll just say it out by heart. This is very important Charedim. He changes the whole meaning of the Gemara. We're only speaking about tumah d'rabanan. In tumah d'rabanan, there are 2 types. So let's speak about beis hapras. So he quotes a Mishnah in Ahalois, and I wanted to say this before, that the Shnei Batei Hapras Tamei. Number 1, you have a field, there was a grave in the field, that field was plowed over, okay? And what's the issue? The plow, the way they buried, the depth of burial and the depth of the plow is such, then the plow for sure dismembered the remains of that person. What's the issue? Once the body is broken up to that point, it does not give up tuma soil. But if a bone is on the periphery of the ground, if there is a bendela, menames, that's on top of the ground, that's matame. Etzem kisoid is matame midoras. And now we say that 100 amas in each direction is not based on us. Midoraisa, there is no tumah, b'chlal. Because the chances of that happening, that there is a bone on top of the ground, is so little that we don't have to take it into account. The whole tumah is a tumah d'orais, a tumah d'rabbanan. Thank you. That's one type of beis hapras. There is another type of beis hapras. which is that there is an area. We know someone was buried there, but we lost the marker. We lost the matzeva. We just don't know where it is. Question is, can a kohen walk through that field? What's the issue? He might be walking over the grave. That's a suffix isur doiraisa. Even though, for whatever reason, midoiraisa, he could, but the Chachamim says he can't. So it says the Charedim like this. If you remember, there's a rule that suffix tomei b'reshus harabim tahor, suffix tuma b'reshus hayachid tomei. We learned all that from the site. Ain't kind of there's not enough time. So says the Charedim, what the Gemara makes it say like this: that when we wanted to know whether a kohen can go l'chvayid hames, and we brought a brayse. The brayse says when a group of people are going to do a mitzvah, if they are choosing because of zrizin to go through the shorter path, even though it's going through a beis hapras, for example, you a kohen can join. I know that for sure should be correct if the beis hapras is soda shenecharash bakever, it was plowed over. The whole tomb is only midrabanan. It's not a suffix doiraisa, which is why even if it's a reshus hayachid, because it's in the field is in a valley during Yom Shamim, where no one is walking there. The definition of a reshus hayachid, reshus harabim, is whether there are 2 people or 3 people or more. Remember that from the Shleita by the Shleita, there's only 2 people. Then you can be lenient. But afilu tuma shimidivrei Torah says the Charedim, I want to know, what about if it's a beis hapras, but it's not the beis hapras where the grave was plowed? It's a beis hapras where the maze was lost. Shenevad bakev. That's a bigger problem. It's also midrabanan, but that's a whole different type of midrabanan. So we should say l'chumra. So do we say that because of kavod harabim we can still be lenient? That's what the Gemara means to ask. Not the way it sounds literally. That's the way the Charedim teaches. So says the Gemara that Rabbi Zajac, from that which Rabbi Zajac said in reference to the brayse that we quoted, that what? That Godlu kavod harabim shudoiche mitzvahs loisese sha'achas. Wow. What are we talking about? What's the mitzvahs loisese that it's doiche? What is the Doisa said that it's doiche? Let me remember. Kuras meis mitzvah. That when it comes to a meis mitzvah, even biblical tuma is something that a kohen has to do. So the fact that Rabbi Zajac linked that fact to the Braisa, Rabbi Zajac, what is he trying to say? He's trying to say that the leniency that the Braisa gave, that the kohen can join the group doing pidyon shivuyim, even going through a beis hapras, he meant even a beis hapras that has a biblical issue. That's something else, correct. Nevertheless, you're allowed to do it, because at the end of the day, it's only the Rabbanan. It's only a Rabbanan. That's how lenient we are for the kohen. And now, it's getting late. We're going to go back to what we learned on Daf Lamed Gimel. On Daf Lamed Gimel, we're not speaking about Kohanim anymore. We're speaking about all people. We are not allowed to eat in front of a corpse. Loya glorosh. We're mocking the impoverished person. As the pasuk continues, so says the Gemara. Rabbi Yoina and Rabbi Yosef Gilila, B'Shem Rabbi Yasef and Rabbi Chanina says another thing, that Ein Shoyalam Halachas L'Fnei Mitos Yishalmeis. You're not allowed to ask a halachic question in front of a mace. Why? So the Charedim brings from Rashi, from Brachas, Loya glorosh. The rush is the person who passed away. You cannot verbally learn Torah. Okay. Says the Gemara, how can that be? Rabbi Yochanan, Shol Rabbi Yanai, Kumei Arsi de Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yoitzadok. Rabbi Yochanan asked Rabbi Yanai the following question: when they were burying Rabbi Shmuel ben Yoitzadok, they were there. What did he ask him? As the Charedim reminds us, if you already took an animal and said, "This is your oilam," this is an oilam means that this animal is already consecrated with kedushas mizbeach. Which means it doesn't really belong to you. What happens if you then say, I am giving this animal to the Berek HaBayis? Now, this animal, it's not yours to give, but maybe you are chayiv to give the value of this animal to the Berek HaBayis. Or since it's so not yours, it's a nonsensical statement. You're not chayiv. That was the question that he asked him. And V'hu Megillah and Abiyana answered. The Charedim says, I don't know what the answer is. We don't have anywhere throughout the whole Shas, not here, not there, what the answer. That's not the point. The point is that they were burying and they were asking and answering questions in front of the bier. You could speak in Torah. So the Gemara answers, no, Neymar Kav Abarachik. Either they were far away. You can do it during a funeral, but you can't do it within daladamas. If you are beyond daladamas, then there's not a problem. Or can't have a maskin leila sidra. Or if they were giving a eulogy, and then whoever is in the same room is considered before the corpse, you can't learn Torah, even though the whole eulogy is one big Dvar Torah, Akasha, but you're doing it L'chavad HaMeis, Nishtov Shabbos Ketan, God forbid, but then that's how it works. So if they were standing outside, that's where they had the back and forth. And similarly, the Gemara says that also there was a question that was asked. The Gemara doesn't even speak about the question. So there also we have to say Neymar either kad have a rochik, have a make lay, either they were far away from the body, or kad have a kadev law. But if they would have been close, then he would not have given him the answer. And for some reason, the Gemara doesn't even give the option that they were outside. Maybe because over there it was a graveside burial. We knew that, and it wasn't. There was no indoors. Okay, now another thing. General
Rabbi.
Yes.
Rabbi, does this rule apply in any cemetery near any grave, or Dafka, the person that's being buried?
No, in any cemetery, in front of any grave.
So you're saying if they were far away, that means they were outside of the cemetery?
Far away? No, Danny. I take it back. I meant to say that in the cemetery itself is not the problem. If you are within Daladamas of a cave, that's where you have the issue. Or if you have a tree, these beautiful trees that they plant, not in the Lubavitcher cemeteries, God forbid, but in the Mount Sinai cemeteries. It's mamish beautiful, like you want to move in there almost. There, yeah. If there's no tree under here, under there, then you're good. Funny. How do we explain what? Because the eulogy is not called learning Torah. It's called we're learning l'kavod hameis. I think we're learning in honor of. It's like saying Tehillim in honor of versus me and you just learning our own Torah. It means going to a eulogy and sitting in there with your chitas when the mace is there. That's the loyeg l'rosh. Tzaddik, very nice. You're learning chitas, but not then. It's like learning chitas during a chazaras hashat. It's the same idea. No, in the room you're not fine. In the room, either or. Very good. Now, we learned in the Brisa. That's the final din of today. That hakatofim, those who are carrying the beer, they put the beer on the shoulder. The shoulder schleppers they are not allowed to put on a sandal. Why? Because Shema Yifsek sandali shalecha. Then maybe one of the sandals will break. And you see, when you're doing a group work, if the group is only as strong as the weakest link, right? So if you need 6 people to carry, or 8 people to carry, if one person has to go bend down and fix their sandals, everyone is going to have to stop. Don't wear a shoe that potentially has shoelaces. Wear slip-ons. Now the Gemara says a story that Rabbi Zajac Shira b'dibura. This is an unbelievable story. So you have to push it. See, without Shira b'dibura says the Charedim Shira. He stopped. He fainted. Rabbi Zajac one time fainted. We'll see soon. He fainted during him giving a eulogy. We'll see. He fainted, and people thought that he died. And they already began to prepare him for burial. Also in Bayan, Miskefine, they began to straighten him out for the burial. They began to put tachrichin on him. And then, mitamo, the ashkechune, iyane, all of a sudden he's responding to them. He began to talk again. Oh, look inside the last charedim. All of a sudden they saw that his ruach came back to him when they started to manipulate his body, and v'diber aleim. So Amrulei, okay, why did this happen? Amaloin, I'll tell you what. That lochein da asina. I was giving a eulogy, and he came to the pasuk that we have in Koheles. Ba'asher hu soif kol adam, because at the end of every man is to go to the base Evel, and the pasuk concludes v'achayit and aliboy. And the pshat of achayit and aliboy, the pshat and achayit and aliboy, the simple is like we learned in Ksubah is that everyone should understand that when you see someone else being eulogized, they're going to eulogize you. When you see a person, not you, God forbid, you, the other, all of us, that when you see a person being buried, every person is going to be buried. Take it to heart that this is the end of everyone. He says he thought about it so much, he became so overwhelmed that he fainted. And what's the message? First of all, I just want to say that we do have still one more daf, only one more daf about the laws of connected to burial and to mourning. And then in daf lamed zayin, we go straight, daf lamed vav on the base, we go straight back to Kriya Shema's, we'll see. In moderation. Maybe the message, what's the message of the story? See, I want you to know, when the Rebbe applied B'chayit and Alibi in the opposite direction, B'chayit and Alibi means that Rebbe always interpreted that when there's a passing, you should start giving more value to life in the context that it should inspire you to do more mitzvahs, like chaparain. Not only chaparain, but look at the attributes of the one who passed away. That's what the Rebbe spoke a lot when the Rebbetzin passed away. And B'chayit yitin aliboy, that was her attribute. So if she doesn't have hands and feet, begashmius, you become her hands and feet. I have the merit to do that on her behalf. That was the B'chayit. The pshat here, B'chayit and aliboy, the way the simple pshat is that he got so into the tragedy of death that he died. In other words, if you live in the future, if you want to live in the future, live in a good future. You're not supposed to live in the past, and you're not supposed to live in the future, but at some times you have to think about the future. So if you take the future into the present, think about Levidik Zajac. Let's think about Mashiach. I think that's the message. Think about Mashiach and start living with Mashiach right now. That should be the B'chayit and Aliboy. And if not, this is what happens.
Shkoyach.
Go ahead, guys.
Rabbi, this is Reb Zera, the same Rabbi Reb Zera. This guy seems like he died many times.
You know what? They're very good. I'm curious whether it's the same Reb Zera. I don't know. It's a good question because Reb Zera with Rabbi went before Abai and Rava. We need to have the chart.
Yeah.